Among the highest reaches of Ashina lies Senpou, a Buddhist temple engraved against a clear sky background, as if it were reaching towards the heavens, trying to grasp the immortality bestowed by the gods. But they have reached too far and, inevitably, there came their fall, as the game would seem to imply. But what, exactly, is happening inside this once hallowed grounds? What is the truth concealed inside Senpou's heart? I'm Bob the Hollow, and this is the Temple of Broken Hearts. At first glance, the game is pretty straightforward about passing judgment upon them. The monks and their ways have been corrupted by an insatiable quest for immortality. And all of the clues really seem to point that way. They are presented as enemies, they have been infested with centipedes and, more importantly, they have abducted and killed several children in the experiments that culminated in the creation of the divine child of rejuvenation. But I believe this is an incomplete picture with many missing pieces, and the key to puzzle together this mystery is to study this temple's ancient history. The first step is placing its creation into a more accurate historical context. Ishin's dialogue states that they were once heretical worshippers of the fountainhead waters, speaking of a time before his rise to power. In fact, the closest place to the Fountainhead Palace that can be found in these lands is the hidden Mibu village, a vassal settlement to the Fountainhead Palace's Mibu Manor that also serves as a gateway to that place. The village's relation to the Fountainhead can be identified by its name, which is said to mean life born of water, and by the many Mibu balloons scattered throughout Ashina that are filled with Fountainhead water. And, with the village's temple featuring a desecrated statue of Buddha, it would be clear that the transition to Buddhism was a later event that took place after their connection to the palace had been severed. The actual founder of the temple is someone you will potentially meet, as the divine child of rejuvenation will bid you speak to him in order to ascertain the details regarding the path to return the dragon's blood to its birthplace in the west. The high priest is actually dead, but from him you will acquire the holy chapter, Dragon's Return. And the crowning achievement of their quest comes in the form of the divine child of rejuvenating waters, a truly mortal child blessed with godly powers. Rice is precious indeed. She can even use the Sakura droplet to reforge Takeru's oath, which begs the question of whether or not she could claim an oathbound of her own, should she ever desire for it. The means that would have allowed her creation are implied by her title, the rejuvenating waters that originate from the blood of a divine heir, an indication that both Senpou and Ashina have worked together at some level. These waters must have come from Takeru's blood, spilled when he severed his own immortality, and Dogen would conduct experiments with them. Experiments he would later abandon, but that would not be forgotten, as Emma states her mentor's research was burned and destroyed, but that some of it was salvaged by a former apprentice, and is now being continued by Dogen inside Ashina Dungeon, a place that directly connects the temple and the castle. A connection that is furthered by the presence of the large crickets and Dogen gifting us with fat wax. The former is otherwise exclusive to Senpou, and the latter, while being stated to form only in rare circumstances, is a common drop from defeated Senpou monks. It isn't clear how, but it is clear that one way or another, Senpou has procured the rejuvenating waters from Ashina Castle. After the temple was founded, the teachings of Buddha guided the way, at least for a time, at least until they were consumed by their lust for immortality, or so they would have you believe. The monks have been infested with the centipedes, and those who are infested cannot be killed by anything less than a mortal blade. They will endure the ages in an immortal path to enlightenment, as stated by the holy chapter in Infested. But the founder himself was also infested, meaning that they had already been bestowed with the worms around the time of the temple's inception. This fact completely undermines the notions that they were driven by their quest for immortality, since they were already infested, and that they had strayed from their path due to this quest, since they had pursued the path to enlightenment despite being infected. Now, a note must be made that the immortality granted by the worm isn't real, considering that the high priest has, in fact, died. But that note does not interfere with the previous statements, since this knowledge could only be obtained after the high priest's passing, and, considering that the divine child of rejuvenation possesses knowledge of the dragon's return, coupled with her assumption that the high priest is still alive, would indicate that they have met at one point, that the infested founder of the temple was still alive not only when they began attempting the creation of the divine children, but also when they reached their first success at this endeavor. So, why did they create the divine child in the first place? Well, the high priest has already told you that. The holy chapter, Dragon's Return, isn't a token item devoid of meaningful lore, meant only to be used as a quest-giving device. The sacred passage is the driving force that fuels all of their actions. The instructions contained within this text detail the instrumentality of the great serpent lever to the creation of the cradle that will bear the divine heir, and Senpou has stood watch over these serpents for a very long time now. Despite being seemingly disconnected from each other, the sunken valley, home of the great serpents, is actually an extension of the temple grounds. They are connected through the sunken valley passage, where the wooden beam could be used to kite down, and its other entrance, past the gun fort, is manned by a long-armed centipede from the temple, who stands guard next to the divine abduction shinobi tool that is also associated with Senpou. The snow-covered cliffs of the gun fort are indeed separate from the temple, considering that, save from a lone statue of Buddha on its outside, the inside of the fort displays a complete lack of religious references. The valley, on the other hand, shares maple leaves, monkeys, many Buddha statues in the Infested with Senpou. The temple's connection to the serpents is exemplified not just by the holy chapter, but also by the statues of Buddha that are accompanied by snakes, upon which one such serpent fruit has been enshrined, and also by the faithful old woman who helps guide our way to these crimson-bathed relics. There is also a single serpent reference just before the long arms in the gun fort, and another single serpent reference inside Senpou Temple itself. Next, to the bell that leads to the halls of illusions. The high priest not only had this knowledge, but he shared it, and he held on to it to the very end. Such a profoundly world-changing, secretive knowledge. How did he come to learn about it in the first place? To answer this question, one must follow the trail of the infested back to its place of origin, the Fountainhead Palace, where, noticeably, we can find Yuriko and the corrupted monk, also known as Yao. When considering these two characters, we must be careful to do so through the appropriate point of view, shifting our perspective when necessary. Why is Yao considered to be corrupted? Keep in mind that she isn't a corrupted person or a corrupted guardian, not even simply corrupted. She's a corrupted monk. The name Hakai Soul, by which she is denominated, is specifically related to monks who have departed from their teachings, and she would have done so by undertaking the duty of guarding the Fountainhead Palace, whose worship would have replaced Buddhism in these lands. And she wasn't the only infested guardian to stand watch here, as her remnant states there would have been others. Likewise, Yuriko is a fallen hero, but who has beheaded him and deemed him fallen? He, and all other headless spirits, seem to be celebrated by Senpou, and Yuriko, in specific, died by the hands of the infamous palace nobles, indicating that his last fight was not one completely without merit. Now, what is this picture trying to tell us? It is trying to tell us that the high priest was among the infested that inhabited this place, which would explain how he would come to be in possession of such insight regarding the divine dragon, and that he may have borne witness to the destruction wrought by the divine dragon as it took root on the Everblossom, which can be seen in the current state of the palace grounds, which could be counted among the reasons for him to wish for the dragon's return to the west. All this harkens back to what I have stated before. They were already infested, and their obsession with mortality is a lie, a matter of perspective. They sought to create the divine child of rejuvenation, yes, but with Holy Chapter in hand, their goal was not to achieve the immortality they already had. Their goal was to walk the path of the dragon's return. They even stopped producing rejuvenating children after they had succeeded but once, for one is all they needed to complete the process. And now, close to the end of the video, I think it's worth noting the difference between the immortality bestowed by the centipedes and that which Ashina has achieved through their research. Despite their reputation, the infested are not the monsters they are made out to be. Hanbei is both helpful and harmless. The guardian ape is still looking for a loving partner. Yao is just performing her duty, and the infested monks of Senpou seem content with spending eternity in meditation, coexisting peacefully with the other monks. And while the mark of the monks is the worm, the mark of Ashina is the red eyes. Doujun's research with rejuvenating waters, derived from Dogen's research, culminates in a red-eyed version of himself. The red-eyed ogres would have been Dogen's prototypes, who are said to have been abandoned in the dungeon, and the new experiments show signs of treading a similar path, since the dungeon prisoners, who usually must be killed twice, will only die once if they have been set on fire. A weakness that, alongside the aforementioned red eyes, links the old and new researches together. But the red-eyed are known to run amok. The ogres must be kept in chains. Doujun kills the Ashina samurai, and the red-eyed nightjar will attack his own brother-in-arms. And the pinnacle of Ashina's research is the undying created through the rejuvenating sediment, embodied by Genichiro, who is willing to shed his own humanity in exchange for the power to save the land he loves. A man seeing the world through the lens of his newly found red eyes. Senpou had waited for a very long time, in preparation for the day when the divine air would imbibe the frozen tears. Many were sacrificed in the pursuit of their mission, but they had made a choice a long time ago, a choice of sacrificing the few for what they believed to be the greater good. Have they strayed from their path? Yes. The monk himself would tell you that this is no longer a place for decent men. But perhaps their reasons were not entirely without merit after all. A simple shift in perspective was needed in order to see it. But to be undying is to walk the eternal path to enlightenment, and a single revelation would eventually dawn upon them. Exalted or not, the divine children are still human. A revelation that would tear the conviction they had in their quest asunder, and when the rejuvenating child locked herself away, they simply let her be. Sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. We are all responsible for our own choices. The monks of Senpou Temple have come to regret theirs. But their sentence isn't death. Their sentence is an eternal lifetime filled with regrets. Their sentence is to keep on living shackled to their own broken hearts.
Children of the rejuvenating waters, forgive me. That child, she's the only one left. It's my fault. The child, she's confined within the inner sanctum. The divine air is truly exalted. But exalted or not, man is still man. Oh, I'm so foolish that I didn't understand that myself. Don't leave your divine heir on his own. Leave. It's too late to regret once you've already lost them.